Bungie dropped a bombshell last week when they announced that all Sunset weapons will have their power level restrictions lifted soon so that you can use gear that you loved, 6 years ago, but haven't been able to bring forward to power level enabled activities since sunsetting kicked down the door to our funhouse years ago. Now, due to vault space issues, many of us sadly deleted many of the relics of Destiny's past that we used to love so dearly, and they're long gone and not coming back. Just like they told us Cade 6 was gone and not coming back. And if that's you, or you know someone affected by sunsetting who deleted their favorite old god rolls, can we just take a minute, just take a moment to share a moment of silence together for all those deleted weapons? Can we do that? Let's do that real quick. Okay, that's good enough. I didn't want to keep you hanging there like a Rick Cackus intro. The point of this video isn't to make you feel bad about what you lost. The point is to show you all the cool stuff I kept and make you feel bad about what you can never have. This is my list of weapons I'm so glad I didn't delete, and we're gonna kick things off with a favorite of mine since the launch of D2 that ended up coming back with random rolls in Forsaken. It's an auto rifle that many of us farmed for back in the early days. It's the Valadin. This solar viced AR was pretty juiced back in the day, and as it turns out, it's still pretty juiced today too. In the background, you'll see some clips from a match on Citadel with skill-based matchmaking on against igneous hammers, summoners, and conditional finalities, where I dropped almost 40 kills and 25 final blows with the Valadin alone. The gun is seriously good still. This thing existed back when Bungie wasn't afraid to put kill clip on things. Now, our rapid fire frame auto rifles have all these dumbed down damage perks, but Valadin could roll with kill clip along with other god tier perks like tap the trigger and dynamic sway reduction and more. I want you to notice how incredibly stable this thing is without a target to shoot at where the aim assist helps keep the reticle stable. Here, I'm just pre-firing. I'm just pre-firing the corner from down freaking town, and that reticle is like Amanda Holiday. Consistent, staying put, ain't going anywhere. My roll has no additional stability perks. That's the crazy part. Mine's kitted for range and recoil direction with kill clip in there to chain kills. It's seriously good, and I'm so glad I kept it because I will absolutely use it again. Let's move on to the next weapon. Do you remember the gun that made thousands of players quit the game? Little something called the Aaron Till.
Enemy claims zone C. Capture power. Keep the pressure.
Stop, cut the footage. You're gonna traumatize them all over again. Jeez, man, I gotta fire this freaking editor, I swear. That's what I get for hiring a numpty from Ohio. Let's talk about a sidearm that people loved instead. Let's chat about the Traveler's Judgment. Now, the Traveler's Judgment is an arc 3-round burst adaptive frame sidearm. Now, originally, this came with the Curse of Osiris DLC, which got terrible reviews and was kind of the leaving point for a lot of people in the community. It was one of the weapons on the pedestal in the old lighthouse next to Brother Vance, but it returned with random rolls in the Season of Dawn when we first met Saint 14. The most popular and well-known sidearm of its kind is probably the Peace Bond. And that weapon, it's highly regarded as an absolute banger, even among people who don't use sidearms. But the Traveler's Judgment, for comparison, listen to this, man. This is crazy to me. It's got more range than the Peace Bond. It's got more base stability than the Peace Bond. It's got more handling than the Peace Bond. It's got a faster reload speed than the Peace Bond. It's got more aim assist than the Peace Bond. It's literally Peace Bond if Peace Bond spent a week in Dominic Toretto's garage. Plus, it has god tier perks for burst fire weapons that Peace Bond doesn't have, like tap the trigger, rapid hit, firmly planted, which activates on slide, and even head seeker. Peace Bond doesn't have any of those. So seriously, please, check your vault for a Traveler's Judgment. You'll be glad you kept one. If you kept one. Now let's move on to something completely different. Let's talk about a sidearm that people loved instead. Let's chat about the 18 Kelvins. There's something we gotta talk about with the 18 Kelvins, but first let me give you the rundown on this thing and a little story to go with it. The 18 Kelvins came out only and specifically in the Warmind DLC. It was never reissued ever again in any other season, any other event. So the only way to have gotten it was to buy the Warmind DLC and do Anna Bray's quests to chase down the Rasputin singing prisms across the frozen Mars map. Now, this weapon is special to me for one very big reason. See, when I went with a few other content creators to Bungie HQ years ago to preview the Warmind DLC and capture footage for some videos, several people from Vicarious Visions were present because they're the studio that built that DLC while Bungie was working on Forsaken. Now, the head of the sandbox team for that DLC at Vicarious Visions is a friend of mine, and he was there. And when I sat down to record footage and I pulled up that sidearm, was looking at it, kind of inspecting it on my Guardian, he leaned over my shoulder and he said to me that when they were drawing that weapon up, he literally said, "What would TV want on this thing?" And he said, "You know, I hope we got it right. I hope you love it." Well, I frickin' do. And I still use this weapon to this day. It has big stability for an adaptive frame sidearm, big handling, and a good above average reload speed, which is great because it's got kill clip on it. It's seriously a great sidearm even today, but here's the big thing people overlook. See, back in the Warmind DLC, many years ago, you didn't have to stick to one element on your gun. You could change it to your liking. And I changed mine, my 18 Kelvins, to Void. Now, if you go to pull an 18 Kelvins out of collections, it's Arc now, but not mine. No, sir. I made mine to synergize with Devour and Void builds. So if you're lucky enough to have an 18 Kelvin still that is not Arc, you have an absolute unicorn, and I love that. I'm so glad I kept this thing. I mean, can you imagine if today you could change the elemental affinity of any weapon, any legendary weapon? You could just be like, hey, this is a really cool Eyes Luna. Let's make it kinetic instead of stare. Let's make it strand. And, you know what I mean? Like, that was revolution. That was a crazy thing that you could do back then. But obviously, we didn't have all these like elemental specific perks on the guns that we now have today. So that's a crazy thing. If you still have any of those original weapons, but you changed the element on it, you've got a unicorn. But let's move on, though. Let's move on to something completely different. Let's talk about a sidearm that people loved instead. Let's chat about the Breachlight. Now, the Breachlight was added back in the Season of Dawn, and this sidearm gets talked about. I think I see this thing mentioned pretty frequently nowadays. And it was really good back in the day, and I think that's why people mention it now. I've seen people bring it up when talking about the Brave Arsenal, and they're like, man, I wish we could have gotten like a really cool sidearm from back in the day. Something like Breachlight, it gets mentioned. I've seen people talking about it since the news was dropped about unsetting or de-sunsetting, sun rising. I don't know, what are we calling it? Can we get on the same page about that? But I immediately saw a lot of people mention the old Breachlight aggressive 2-round burst sidearm. But I gotta say, guys, unfortunately, and it really does pain me to say this, but the Breachlight didn't age well. It really didn't. It was really good back then, but it got seriously power crept. Unfortunately, it's got like no stability perks outside of Under Pressure, which doesn't kick in until halfway through the very large magazine on that gun. But beyond that, I mean, its base stats are like, they're like if the Forgiveness, you know, the Forgiveness from Trials, it's like if the Forgiveness got sent to Alcatraz for a few years with limited rations. You know, it got all shriveled up, it lost weight, and the light in its eyes got pounded into catatonic apathy from being someone else's prison bitch. The Forgiveness has 12 more range than the Breachlight, which, I mean, that's a ton. That's a lot of range. It also has more stability, more handling, faster reload speed, more aim assist, better airborne effectiveness, better recoil, plus it can get adept mods. I mean, as much as I wanted to love my Breachlight, I mean, it was very clear from the get-go that this thing will only live on as a shadow of its former self. You may as well let it go the way of the M-Tashed and leave Destiny forever. Maybe some anime waifu can make good use of it somewhere in the mobile game world. And now finally, I want to wrap up this video with the weapon I wish I had, but sadly I no longer possess. It's a weapon that was hard to get originally, was only available in one specific seasonal activity, could not be focused, and would fit into the current sandbox better than Harvey Weinstein at an Activision executive party. I'm talking, of course, about the Gallard 42XN7568. This had a random chance to drop during the completion of a Black Armory Forge encounter, and this thing had the ability to match the current summoner's max range. You know the summoner, right? It's kind of like super meta right now. The Gallard could match the current summoner's range, but then also have 4 more zoom on top of that range. Not to mention it had kill clip and tap the trigger. Literal god tier auto rifle. It was considered a menace in a sandbox where auto rifles sucked. Now imagine how it would fare now that auto rifles are kind of banging. I You remember Yamcha from Dragon Ball Z? All that dude ever did was die, right? In the Dragon Ball Z world, that dude may as well have been Pippin trying to fight alongside the armies of Gondor and Minas Tirith. But if you could take Yamcha out of Dragon Ball Z and put him in a Teletubbies movie, I bet he kills everyone and finally gets to feel what it's like at the top. That's the Gallard getting transported out of the Season of the Forge and into the current Season of the Wish and beyond. I think this thing is going to be nutty if you kept a god roll. And that, my friends, concludes my list of weapons for today. But I'd really love to hear from you guys. Would you put down in the comments section for me at least 2 to 3 weapons you held on to that you're super excited to bring forward and use again in Destiny 2? Did I miss some absolute bangers or outliers that will pop off now? Be sure to let me know. Thanks as always for tuning into the video today. I genuinely appreciate each and every one of you, and definitely stay tuned to the channel as this week we'll be reviewing both the returning Blast Furnace and the Luna's Howl here on the channel. Be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in the Crucible.
It is just you now. Fight until you have nothing left. You alone bring victory.